You're listening to If Only I Were Wiser podcast, where Raina Wilson brings together wisdom and raw life stories to provide encouragement and truth. So many times it's easy to become discouraged in your own pursuit of health because your story or circumstances look drastically different from your favorite influencer or even the expectations you had for yourself. If that is you, welcome! This space is for you to learn, breathe, and maybe just listen and see what wellness could look like for you. Hey friends, welcome back to the If Only I Were Wiser podcast. On today's episode, we're talking about all things healthy hormones with Leisha Drews. Leisha is a mom of 3, registered nurse, FDN-P, and holistic hormone coach, and the host of the Happily Hormonal Podcast. Now, we've talked about hormones here and there on the podcast, but in this episode, we do a deep dive. What are hormones? Why do they matter? Are they really all that buzz on social media? And how to restore energy, balance them, and feel good in our bodies again. So let's go ahead and dive. Welcome, Leisha, to the If Only I Were Wiser podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for this.
Like I said, I'm really pumped because we've talked about hormones in a variety of different ways on the show, but not like a broad stroke, let's talk about hormones kind of thing, because it's such a buzzword on social media. But before we get into that, let's get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah, so my name is Leisha. I am a registered nurse and functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, which I kind of wish that was a shorter name, to be honest. It's like a really big mouthful. But essentially, I work with women as a holistic health coach now, and I'm also a wife and a mom of 3, 9, 6, and almost 3 years old. And we're homeschooling, and I was going to say we're homesteading. I've never said we're homesteading before, and we're not really homesteading, but we do have a garden, and we do have chickens. We moved to the acres.
It counts.
So
it counts.
There's just a lot of things going on here, and they're all so good. So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, it so counts. I would love chickens, but my husband chalks it up to the military of like, we can't have chickens on post, like on base. Yeah. And I'm just like, well, someday.
Right. Well, and the thing is, like, you can have them until someone notices.
I know, but with our neighbors' dogs, and I love our neighbors' dogs, it's just like, I don't even trust these chickens out here in our neighborhood. So
Probably true.
I know we've talked about a little bit of, you've shared your own story, and we talked about it on your show, but I would just love to hear, like, what got you into crunchy living, and like what took you from nurse to functional nutrition to wanting to serve women in this capacity?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it, of course, like, it's kind of like a long and windy story, so I'll kind of keep it brief. But I went to nursing school basically straight out of high school. Right after high school, I graduated in December. I graduated a little early and went to a tech school. I thought I wanted to teach preschool. I was like, I want to have my own preschool. This is what I want to do. Went to this program, like an early childhood education certification, whatever, for a quarter of a semester. And then they canceled the program and they knocked down the building. And I was like, oh,
no.
Okay. Like, maybe this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing. Like, this feels like a sign. And so they had a pre-nursing program right next door at the same school. And my grandma had told me my entire, like, since I was probably 10 years old, like, honey, if you want to do something good, you should be a nurse. This is my sweet, precious grandma who, like, look up to, adore. And she just kept telling me that. And I would be like, Grandma, no, like, nurse, that's gross. I don't want to be a nurse. Like, no, I'm not going to do that. So then I hear my grandma's voice in my head, and she's like, honey, if you want to do something good, you should be a nurse. I'm like, you know what? I'll try it. I'll try it for you, Grandma. I didn't tell her that specifically, but I was like, I'll try it out. Went to pre-nursing school, and I was like, oh, I like this. Like, science, get to draw blood, like, all of this stuff. Like, I liked it. So I was like, all right, I'll go to nursing school. Went to nursing school, started working in the hospital. While I was in nursing school, just dove in head first and worked in the hospital for 10 years. And as I worked in the hospital, of course, like, I got married, I had my first daughter, and that's when you really kind of start to question everything as a mom, a woman is like, hold on, what's going on here? And so I had my own hormone issues at that point. My periods were really, like, long cycles, irregular. As I would ask my mom about it, and she'd be like, oh yeah, that's just how it is in our family. So it's like, okay, cool, that's how it is in our family. But I really had no idea what was going on in my body, to be honest. Like, I would have these symptoms. I wouldn't know what they were about. I would just think, okay, it's just probably normal or whatever. I had a lot of migraines. I had terrible acne as a teenager. And none of this was ever explained to me. And we went to a dermatologist, we went to all the people, took all the meds. And I remember my mom asking that dermatologist, should she not eat like fries or chocolate? Like, I know those foods can trigger acne. Those are the two things. And he was like, that's a myth. It doesn't matter what she eats. I remember him saying that. And as like a 16-year-old, I was like, see, Mom, I can eat fries. Like, it's fine. The doctor said so, right?
Yeah.
But looking back, I'm like, what in the world? What in the world? That's a myth. It doesn't matter what you eat, like how your skin looks. So there's a lot that I would redo probably or change, and that's not how life works. So all that to say, like, we went through the conventional medical system. As I was working as a nurse, I really, I had a friend who suggested going gluten-free for my migraines. And I was like, I don't know, whatever. And so that's where I got my toes wet, was gluten-free. And so I was like, okay, gluten-free. And I was like, oh, look at this. I don't have migraines anymore. So that was great. And then just from there started, diving in a little deeper, understanding a little more over the years, like what food actually does for you and how important it is to be eating healthy. And like my eating healthy in my young 20s was like eating a lean pocket with my salad. And everyone was like, oh my gosh, you're so healthy. You're always eating salads. Do you even eat meat? Like, I remember people talking to me like that at work, and I was like not eating healthy at all. I was eating so much processed food, and like I'm sure my salad dressing was like full of seed oils. Anyway, but it's just so funny how your perception changes. So really started to understand like that food was important, that I needed to focus on food. And then my daughter had asthma when she was 2. And that was a big red flag for me, because I went to her pediatrician with her. She was getting sick all the time. She was wheezing in the middle of the night. It was terrifying. And he was like, well, she's probably just going to have asthma. She's too little to diagnose, but we'll give you these 3 inhalers and she's going to be on these for a long time. And that was the hard no for me. Like, there was just something in my spirit that was like, this is wrong. My baby is not going to be sick. I do not accept this. And that's where I was like, we're not doing this, and found a practitioner who helped me do gut testing for her, did some food changes, and she got better. Like, she's never had asthma again. It took maybe 6 months.
Dang.
And so that was the moment for me where I was like, this works. I want to actually help people. I was seeing people come back in the hospital sicker and sicker and sicker. And I was like, I want to get ahead of this essentially and really help people before they turn. In Oklahoma, we have a lot of people who are like in their 60s who are super unhealthy, in their 50s who are super unhealthy. Like, before they get to that point, like, how can I teach them about nutrition? So that's really where I dove in with nutrition. I wanted to do something like holistic nutrition, functional nutrition. And so I found a program that worked for me. And I love the FDN program because I could do functional labs too and get those numbers. And I like having that opportunity. So that's kind of my journey to functional health. And then as I started working with people, I was just like, I want to help everyone. I want to help anyone. And I found out like you can't actually do that very well typically unless you have a team with you. And so I found that I loved working with moms, because when moms change their health, their entire family's health changes. And so that's what it's about for me.
Oh, I love that. I'm so thankful for your just knowledge and wisdom in the space, because we need more of that. I had a similar story of had super bad acne. They gave me Accutane. I was on birth control for 8 years. Didn't realize, that's probably why I'm having panic attacks in my psychology course, Not to mention I was eating like Hot Pockets, never exercising, and lean cuisines, and because calories.
Yeah, exactly. I know. Same exact story. I took so many antibiotics too. I took a ton of antibiotics for my skin. And I will tell you, like, Accutane probably was the thing that eventually worked. And then I started changing it. But like, I would not ever recommend that, because I've helped so many people with their acne without Accutane.
Yeah, which is wild, because even one of my close friends is an esthetician. She's a holistic practitioner as well. And she's like, Accutane really is just a mega dose of vitamin A. And vitamin A is what makes your skin glow. So she's like, first of all, you shouldn't have that much vitamin A all in one dose.
Right.
So either you get that horrible list of side effects, which like many of us walk through, peeling skin, I just remember having like my lips were cracking, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
But, nutrition has nothing to do with your skin. So
nothing. It's a myth.
I would love to dive into all things hormones. Like I said, it's such a broad scope, so you can take it wherever you want. We can dissect it however you want. But everybody, I feel like in the wellness sphere on social media, it's like, it's your hormones are messed up. It's cortisol. What does that even mean? Where do we start?
I'm going to say cortisol a lot more.
Right?
That's my new friend. Is that true? That's just my feed. I don't know. Okay, so yeah, I'll start with the broad scope of hormones. So when women think of hormones, typically we think of our periods, typically we think of our moods, and we think of, if we have any context of hormones, we think of estrogen and progesterone. And that's kind of like narrow view. But hormones are just chemical messengers in the body. So there are so many different hormones in your body that have nothing to do with your sex hormones and have nothing to do with fertility, except for they all kind of do work together. So some of the things that people don't know are hormones is like insulin is a hormone. So cortisol is a hormone. There are hundreds of hormones in our body. And so it's not just your sex hormones. So the thing that I want you to hear first, if you're like, okay, I think something's off with my hormones, you're probably right. Our hormones are our hormones are so imbalanced these days. And it's like when someone is just like, something's off with my hormones, I want to focus only on my hormones, you're missing it's like the tip of the iceberg, for lack of a better term. I know that's so cliche, but like it really is, because as a woman, your hormones react to how your body is handling stress. And so it's not even just about cortisol and then estrogen and progesterone. It's about how your body is perceiving the safety of your world, essentially. And so if you are constantly stressed, if you're working too much, you're working out too much, you're not eating enough, you're not eating enough nutrients, or like our story, you're taking a bunch of Accutane and you're in nursing school and you're eating Taco Bell all the time, and you wonder why you're having migraines, you wonder why your periods are not in like the place that they should be. Your body has to have these signals of safety to say, first of all, things are safe. Second of all, I have the resources I need to produce hormones, because estrogen and progesterone in your monthly cycle, it's all about fertility, and your body is always going to be protecting you. So if you are in a super stressed state, super nutrient depleted, super toxic, and I don't even just mean like emotionally toxic relationships, I mean like toxins in your world, could be both, then your body is never going to interpret that as, this is really great for my fertility and I feel safe to focus on fertility. And what that means would be making enough estrogen, detoxing that estrogen well, making enough progesterone, having regular cycles, pain-free periods, no PMS. Like that's what that can look like if your body is getting the right signals. But it's not ever going to focus on that if you're just taking a happy hormone supplement and maybe doing an adrenal cocktail and you're living a super stressed life, you're not nourishing well, you're over-exercising or even under-exercising. Like there's so much that goes into balanced hormones. Now, with that being said, I don't want you to be throwing your hands up in the air like, oh man, like there's so much that goes into it. Like I'm never going to be able to do it. It really is the basics. I know Instagram will tell you like you have to be fancy, you have to take the right supplements and all the things, but like it truly is the things that you already know, to be honest. Like you know that your body needs rest. You need to sleep every night. You need to get good sleep. You know that you need to eat consistently to feel good. Now, you may have been told it's better to fast, it's better to restrict, you shouldn't need food, you're, whatever, you're a robot, I don't know what you've heard. But like truly, we need to eat consistently, we need to eat good food, we need to sleep, we need sunshine, and we need community and like emotional support. All of those things are going to tell your hormones in your body, your brain specifically, that things are safe. And they're all going to contribute to happier hormones. So is there more that you can do? Yes, absolutely. But like if you're not doing those things, the fancy stuff is never going to work.
Yeah, I 1000% agree. And we talked a little bit about the fertility hormones, but cortisol, like we said, is a major buzzword right now. I think I saw a reel last week. She was like, yeah, everybody's talking about cortisol this, cortisol that. I don't even know what freaking cortisol is, but apparently my cortisol is messed up. Yeah. So if you can just kind of explain that, and is it something that we should be freaking out about? Like, is it really all that?
Yeah. Okay. So cortisol is a major stress hormone in the body. And how cortisol is made is the brain, specifically the pituitary gland in the brain, receives signals from your world that says things are safe, things are not safe, this is an emergency right now. And that can be external signals, but it can also be internal signals. So for an example, something that would spike your cortisol would be your child runs toward the street. That spikes your cortisol. That's obvious. Another thing that would spike your cortisol is you're at the store, you look at your bank account, the money is not there that you want it to be there. That's stressful, right? Or even that's a long-term stressor that can spike your cortisol on and off. Another thing that we don't think about is when our blood sugar is imbalanced, when you have a big a dip in blood sugar, then you're going to have a spike in cortisol because that helps get your blood sugar back up to keep you alive. So in that case, that's a good thing that your cortisol is spiking to keep you alive. But it's a bad thing that it needs to do that multiple times a day because you're not nourishing well. And so any of those things can keep you essentially in fight or flight. So your pituitary gland is getting those signals from your internal world or your outside world saying, this is an emergency, this is an emergency. Maybe things feel safe at this point. There is rest here. I'm getting the nutrients that I need. So your brain is always getting those signals. And those signals will tell your adrenal gland how much cortisol to make. So if you're living in a super stressed state, like I've already kind of illustrated, your body is going to be making cortisol a lot more. You're going to be making a lot more cortisol. And that brain to adrenal axis, that connection, and those hormones that are, regulating all of this, it's going to only really stay in that super high cortisol state for so long. It can be different amounts of time for different people. But if you are constantly getting signals of stress over and over and over and over for years and years at a time, or months and months, depending on your reserves, your body is eventually going to say, hold on, something's wrong with this signaling. Like, I cannot have been running from a bear for 3 years straight.
Right.
But can we have been in a stress state for 3 years? Absolutely. Everyone's raising their hand right now. Like, I can.
Yeah.
And when we have that stress state for a long time, your body is going to say, this can't be right. I'm not going to keep making this much cortisol. I don't have the reserves to do it. And essentially, like, it must not be right. And so then we decrease our cortisol production. And that's where a lot of people will call this like adrenal fatigue or HPA axis dysfunction. But what it feels like is you're really tired. You don't have the energy to do what you need to do. Maybe you feel depleted, depressed, potentially anxious. You're not sleeping well a lot of times. No libido. Like, there's lots and lots of symptoms with this, but essentially, like, you feel pretty depleted. You feel pretty tired. You don't have the reserves that you need. And so, yeah, cortisol plays a huge role in our bodies. And it plays a really big role in our sex hormones as well. So that same axis, or it's a similar axis, so the hypothalamus and pituitary gland in your brain to the adrenals, that's kind of like one little triangle of messaging. But then you also have one that's called the HPG axis. That's the same two organs in your brain, the hypothalamus and pituitary gland. And then it goes to your gonads. And so in women, that's the ovaries. And it tells the ovaries what hormones to make. And that affects your ovulation. So it affects follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, but it especially affects your estrogen and your progesterone. And so if your body is getting these stress signals over on the other axis, and it's like, we're stressed the heck out, nothing's going right, it's going to down-regulate your hormone production. And it's going to say, hey, listen, sorry about you. I don't have the reserves. And also, it's not safe to have a baby right now. So we're not going to prioritize ovulation. And we're not going to prioritize, estrogen detoxification, even through the liver, because the liver is so overstressed with keeping your blood sugar balanced, maybe working on, detoxing some overgrowth in your gut. It's working on all the toxins that are coming in. Like, if your liver is overburdened, it's not going to be able to detox your hormones as well. And so all of this works together for hormone symptoms to show up. But when we look, so if we go back, like, is cortisol the thing? It's like, is this the thing to fix everything? I think it could be yes and no. I mean, the true answer is no. Like, there's not any one thing. But if you're like, okay, I have too much cortisol, or I can tell that my cortisol is depleted at this point, like, how can I support my adrenal glands? Well, you can support your adrenal glands. You can do adrenal cocktails. I love adrenal cocktails, by the way. Most people, had a friend message me actually just even last week, and she's like, hey, I think I'm in adrenal fatigue. What supplement should I take? And I'm like, well, are you eating food? Are you, like, we've got to go back to the basics first. So it's those signals of safety. And so when you have those signals of safety in your body, your cortisol will regulate over time. And I think that we always have to be aware that if you continue to live a really stressed lifestyle where you're running all the time, you're, always in fight or flight, just even emotionally, maybe that's because of relationships, maybe it's because of money, maybe it's because of work, maybe it's because of how you're managing your household or your time, like that's going to hit you just as hard as the physical things, if not harder. So it really has to be the big picture. And that doesn't mean you have to fix everything at once, but I think you do have to be really honest with yourself and be like, is the pace I'm keeping sustainable? Is it even a life that I want to live? I think that sometimes that's a question to ask is like, am I living a life that I really want to live? Like, if not, what needs to change? And like, what's one step toward that change? It doesn't, I'm just always such an advocate for focused small steps. And so that, I think that could be even, your takeaway from hearing about cortisol and hearing about, how your body needs those signals of safety is sitting down and just making a list, like, what are the things that are stressing me out? And then like, what is changeable? And not at all getting into the victim mentality of like, oh, I'm stuck here. You're not stuck there. There may be things that are out of your control, but there are also things that are in your control. And as you look at those, I think probably more things are in your control than you would usually notice. And then also how you are interpreting what's happening in your life is in your control. And so even changing how you're looking at your situation is going to make a really big difference in your body feeling that safety. So I just want to encourage you there, even if you're like, well, I'm stuck in a really, hard money situation, or I can't leave my job and my job is stressing me out, then starting to look for the things that are positive and, how this is working for you or how this is shaping you for the better, or even just the small things that you do love in your day. Those things can all be really powerful where your brain's like, oh, I am safe because I really love this lunch that I'm having. Oh, I am safe because I got some sunshine. Oh, I am safe because I had a good conversation with my coworker. Like, you can be looking for those things even in a hard situation.
Yeah. And I think that's such a key point to, like you said, managing our issues with control of like, we may not be able to control all the things, but we can control how we perceive it and react to it. And one of the things like I've talked about on my platform is like simple joys, like as silly as it is.
Yeah.
It's like my fun bevy for the day is my simple joy. So like
Absolutely.
if everything else goes to crap today, then I can be like, I had my Olipop and it was delicious. And those 3 minutes were like the highlight of my day. Not to like play victim or like, like change perspective. And I think it's just that shift towards gratitude, or like the intentionality of gratitude, because that truly does make a huge difference in your perception of how you deal with like crappy situations or even just like crappy seasons, which we walk through that with mold and just, I mean, like we're getting ready to move again. It's like, well, we have a lot to control. We have a lot we don't control. And I get to pick out the color of the tape, so we got fun tape.
There you go.
It's the little things. It's the simple joys.
One mindset shift that I know has been really helpful for me the last few months has just been like, this is not happening to me. It's just happening. I feel like that really helps me just in the moment be like, okay, like I don't have to be offended at this. I'm not the victim. Like, this is just happening. And maybe that's just my kids like having a fit or not getting in the car. Like, it might be just little things like that, or it could be something bigger, like problems we've had with our house. It's like, it's just happening. And so like, what am I going to do about it is the next question versus like, who do I need to be mad at? And so that's been a big shift for me, even just that little phrase.
Yeah, that's super insightful. I do want to hop back a little bit to the adrenal cocktails. I love them.
Yes.
We love them. But for those of you that aren't familiar with it, what is it and why is it important? And or how could it be actually helping our hormones? And like you said, the little steps.
So I love adrenal cocktails for a couple of reasons. I love them because they can be a little bit of a routine in your day that creates just a little bit of safety. They're very important because of the minerals that they contain. And so you can always Google adrenal cocktail recipes. There's lots of them online. Kind of the most typical adrenal cocktail recipe is like some orange juice, some coconut water, and a pinch of salt. Some people will add a little bit of cream of tartar for extra potassium. I typically will do either that or just coconut water and maybe some lemon or lime and some salt for a super simple option, especially if you're working on blood sugar regulation. That one's really good because it doesn't have the orange juice. But why is it so important? So the three main components of the adrenal cocktail are sodium, potassium, and vitamin C. Each one of those is really supportive for your adrenals, but it's actually like so important for your overall just mineral status and for stress in your body. So minerals are, this could be a whole other, 10-hour conversation about minerals, but so much of the time when you are under stress, your minerals are depleted. And typically we probably started out depleted as kids because our moms were depleted. And so replenishing minerals is incredibly important. And it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be like a super complicated mineral blend. Like what I see most is that women are depleted in potassium, probably also magnesium, but sometimes the body needs sodium and potassium first to be able to just even let those other nutrients in the cell and to be replenished in that way. So we burn a lot of sodium and potassium under stress, and the adrenals specifically need those nutrients. And then there's also vitamin C, and vitamin C is a really important antioxidant in the body. I don't like any vitamin C that's not a whole food based. So foods that are rich in vitamin C, like orange juice or lemon or lime, that's ideal. And then if you choose to do a supplement version, I always recommend like acerola cherry, camu, something like that, not ascorbic acid vitamin C. That's not going to give you the nutrients that you need and can kind of mess with your other minerals. So that's the adrenal cocktail. The kind of optimal times to do that are around like 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. And so especially if you're like, man, I'm so depleted, typically those are probably times that you're feeling tired anyway. And so I always recommend doing it maybe like 20, 30 minutes before you typically would start to feel tired. And especially if you like to shoot some caffeine at that time, then maybe doing it instead of the caffeine or at least before, giving your body a little something to go on. And then if you are, especially if you're hitting the coffee or the energy drinks hard, really trying to have a little bit of a snack, like some protein and carbs before or instead of even. But I think a little bit of caffeine can be fine if your body can handle it.
Yeah, which is so crazy to think about, who we used to be. Rena waking up drinking black coffee at 6 a.m. for her shift at the gym and then not eating till noon because intermittent fasting, right?
Right. And because it's easy. It's easy not to eat. Well, and I didn't even like coffee until probably college. And then I would drink frappuccinos, like just sugar.
I love those.
Syrup.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say I wouldn't drink one every once in a while now, but it would be like, that's my ice cream for the day.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Versus like, this is just what I do every afternoon is a frappuccino when I get tired.
Yeah. Totally. Well, maybe this answers my next question because you already touched on like adrenal cocktails are a super sustainable and attainable step to just kind of chilling out, and again, nutrition plays a huge role in that. Your minerals play a huge role in that, especially when it comes to combating like stress and stress resilience. So what are some of your 3 simple ways to balance your hormones? Like you said, it's all lifestyle, but what would be some of the top things that you're like, no, if you had to throw everything else out the window, this is what you should start with?
Yeah. So my system for balancing hormones really stems from you need to be making hormones well and you need to be detoxing hormones well. That's step 1 and step 2. And in my course, that is step 1 and step 2. And then I have a few other steps to like optimize and really empower and educate yourself after that. But step 1 is you've got to be making hormones well. So you have to have the ingredients to do that, which goes back to really consistent whole food nutrition. And that doesn't mean perfect. It doesn't mean you eat super clean every single second of the day, but it does mean that most of the meals you're eating are real food and that you're balancing some carbs and some protein at your meals. And fat is also important, but typically if you're eating whole foods, you're probably getting fat with all of your meals anyway with animal proteins. And so I don't focus on that because, again, like simplifying everything is ideal when you're in such a state of like stress, overwhelm, your hormones are a mess. Like you don't need to be thinking about anything you don't need to be thinking about. So protein and carbs together at every meal, not skipping meals, not intermittent fasting. That's number one. And
Mhm.
sometimes that can feel harder when you're, or like there's more to that. It sounds really simple if I'm just saying that, but sometimes it's like, you need some steps to figure out how to actually do that. And so I do have that available, and you can walk through and understand like what is whole food nutrition, what foods are actually serving me well. I don't believe in over restricting. If there's a food that's obviously giving you a problem, you should probably not eat that one for a while. But like, I really focus on adding things in. And I think that that's really huge, is coming out of a restrictive mindset and knowing that like you can eat enough for a grown woman, and like you don't have to eat a toddler portion. That can be really, really huge. And even, that goes into metabolism, and you have to have fuel in your body for your body to rev up the fire enough to burn fuel, essentially. So consistency with whole food nutrition, really getting, honest with yourself about your stress, and not just being like, oh, everyone's stressed, I'll be fine, right? And like, if you looked at your life from the outside and it was your best friend's life, like, what would you think about it? I think that's a really good way to
Mm.
look at it. Because we can see it for our friends and we're like, oh my gosh, she has so much going on. Like, no wonder she's tired. No wonder she's whatever. But for us, we're like, I can probably do it. I can probably
Yeah.
handle it. Like, it's fine. It's just another
Yeah.
week, right? Um, but it can be a lot. So looking at that, and then understanding that minerals play a really big role. So consistency with nutrition looks like, balancing your blood sugar and supporting your liver. Those are going to be the two biggest things. And so that brings us to the second part, which is making sure that you're detoxing hormones well, and you have to have nutrients to do that. So
Mm.
I think that's like kind of more than 3 steps and kind of less, but like those would be the things that I
But
focus on
no, that's
first.
super helpful. Well, I would love to get into detoxing your hormones, because I've heard that you hear that buzzword on social media, detox, just
Yeah.
detoxing in general.
Mm-hmm.
I just remember in college, in a nursing nutrition course, and she was like, you don't really need to detox. And she was like, please don't drink all the green juices. She's like,
Yeah.
they're not doing it for you guys. All that to say, I am aware, because I've done it in my own story, that like you said, your fertility hormones have a huge role in how you feel. And you may not notice that until you hear things like estrogen dominance, or you notice the symptoms that you may not be having clear lymphatic pathways to be able to detox.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you say, maybe starting with estrogen, would detox even look like? Is it something that we need to do? Or is it, like I said, just another buzzword?
No, I think it's really not another buzzword, but I also am not going to say like, just don't go to the health food store and buy something that's like, this is a liver detox, this is the 30-day cleanse.
Right.
Like, don't do
Yeah.
that.
Please don't buy 6 juices, because
No,
this is not going to be what
it's really
does your
not going to be
detox.
effective. Everything that I teach is long-term strategy and consistency versus let me go do this 30-day thing, whether that's Whole 30, whether that's the 30-day, cleanse that you find at the health food
Mm-hmm.
store. Like, those
Yep.
things are not necessarily bad, but they almost give you this false sense of security. Like, oh, I did this for 30 days, so now my health must be in perfect condition and I'll move on. Or a false sense of like disappointment, because you're like, hold on, I did this thing for however long and I don't feel all the results that I wanted to feel. Well, you can't force your body to detox. So I think that that's a lot of times what happens when you're doing like whatever, short-term detox plan you're doing. But what you really need to understand is that to detox well, your liver plays a huge role. So that's where I always like to start. There are a lot of signs when your liver is not doing well. So you can have like breast tenderness before your period. You can have heavy, clotty periods. You can have PMS. You can have hormonal acne. You can have, painful periods. Like, those are all signs to me that you're not detoxing estrogen well,
Mm.
and or you're making too much, but usually it's both. Um,
Yeah.
and so how do we start to detox? Well, I always focus on the liver first. I like to use food first. So there's specific foods that are good for the liver, like lemon juice and parsley and bitter greens and beets. And like, we kind of all know typically what those foods are. There are
Mm-hmm.
more as well, but it's not just about eating those. It's about actually having a baseline of eating whole foods consistently so that you're not overburdening your liver with toxins, number one. Because if you're eating a lot of packaged food, there's a lot of preservatives in that. That's going to overburden your liver. If you're eating a ton of food that's not organic or like, really highly treated with pesticides, herbicides, antibiotics, like all the things, all going
Right.
to overburden your liver as well. And so that makes a huge difference. It's just bringing down the load that's coming in. And then you can support your liver with some of those foods. Balancing your blood sugar supports your liver in a huge way, because if your liver isn't constantly trying to keep you alive and keep your blood sugar at a reasonable level, then it can actually focus on detoxification. Sleeping enough is huge for liver support, because when you're sleeping, you have a really great window in the middle of the night that your liver can work, as long as you're asleep, a few hours
Right.
before that. So that's really important too. And then there's herbs that you can do. There are lifestyle things that you can do. There's really a lot that you can do to support your liver. And that's one of the big things I focus on with my clients. And it does need to be a little bit personalized. It needs to be like, let's figure out what are you already doing? What are you not doing? So that it's not, here's 25 steps that you could take to detox
Yeah.
your liver if you're not taking the first step of eating well and, making sure
Right.
that your body has that support. So that's where I start with the liver. I do love castor oil packs for the liver. I'll just throw that out there. Um, those are really great, because castor oil has a lot of anti-inflammatory properties, and essentially just kind of like increases blood flow to the liver, decreases inflammation a little bit, and kind of just helps it work better. So it's not a forced detox by any means. It's just like, hey, here's a little boost for your liver. So I like to do those. Those are easy. And then when we look at other detox organs, there's other detox pathways in the body. It's not just the liver. So I don't know what number this is. They're all super important, but the gut is really important. So I have a lot of women who will tell me I have hormone problems, and they'll say, "How's your digestion?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, that's a problem too." But they wouldn't lead with that because it doesn't feel connected. But like, if you're constipated, that's huge, because maybe your liver is detoxing the hormones, and then they're getting stuck in your gut, and then they're getting reabsorbed, and that causes issues. So constipation's a huge issue. But also, if you have other gut issues like gas, bloating, diarrhea, acid reflux, any of those things, there's inflammation there, and that can be overburdening your liver too. So supporting your gut, if your gut is, working well, you're having 1 to 2 healthy bowel movements a day, you're, not gassy, not bloated, that's going to be huge in your body detoxifying, because it's one of the ways you're getting toxins, waste out of your body. It's one of the biggest ways, honestly. And then you mentioned the lymphatic system, and the lymphatic system is really important too. And the lymphatic system is pretty easy to support if you're not trying to like catch up from years and years of not supporting it. There are
Right.
foods that support the lymphatic system, but also just movement supports it, sweating supports it. So if you're at a desk job, you're sitting inside all the time, you're in 73 degrees all the time, you never sweat, you never, move, that's going to be really bad for your lymphatic system. But if you're up and moving, your lymphatic system, let me back up, is this really kind of like integrated through your whole body system, and it has these little pathways of ducts, and the ducts are different than like veins and arteries because they don't have an active pump like the heart. And so what your body relies on to move that lymph is your motion and your muscles pushing against it, essentially. And so the lymphatic system is really a huge part of your immune system, but also detoxification. And so waste products from your body, toxins that your body has detoxified, do get moved into the lymph, and then it needs to be moved throughout your body into one of the major lymph ducts that actually dumps into your circulatory system so that it can be moved out of the body. And so you've got to make sure that that lymph is moving. And there's lots of different ways you can do that. But like rebounding is great. Doing like dry skin brushing can be great, but you do need to do a little research into like how to do this in an actually helpful way. I did dry skin brushing for like quote unquote dry skin brushing for years. And then I watched a video and I was like, oh, wow, I wasn't doing anything that whole time because I was doing it for like 1 minute, super fast. Like you do have to be a little intentional about it, but there's multiple ways that you can support your lymphatic system that only take a few minutes. And then maybe like once or twice a week, you do a little more of a spa day and you spend 10 minutes doing your dry brushing and you do like facial drainage and things like that. And I can definitely vouch for this because I noticed that I tend to get kind of like clogged up kind of behind my ears and like in my throat area. And I wouldn't really even notice it, but like if I were to press on it, like maybe it feels like a little sore or a little like, oh, it's like a little congested in there. But when I start to do a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of facial drainage and neck drainage, I'm like, oh, I feel clearer. I feel lighter, right? And so if you have like swelling in your hands and feet, if you feel sluggish a lot, if you have swollen lymph nodes, um, if your immune system is really struggling, then the lymphatic system would be a place to look at. And again, like you're not doing all of this at once. You're just going to start with the first step. And then you're going to say, like, okay, I'm consistent. Like, I'm back to being consistent with my food, but like, I'm consistent with my food. I'm clear that I'm not getting tons of toxins in through that. I'm working on balancing my blood sugar, and my energy is starting to feel better. My brain fog's starting to feel better. Maybe I even notice a little bit of a difference in my PMS or even my periods. Like, okay, then like you've got that confirmation that you're on the right track. And then you are like, okay, what's next? Maybe it's castor oil packs. Maybe it's like, I'm going to focus on my liver. Maybe I'm going to start doing some dry brushing, but you're not going to do all of it at the same time. Because I had
Right.
someone ask me the other day, they were like, can you just write down everything you do to support your hormones on a daily basis? And it's been like a really busy life. I was going to say season, but
Mm-hmm.
like it's been
Yeah.
really busy. And I was like, shoot, this is going to make me look bad. Like, I don't even know. Like, I started writing it down and I was like, actually, I am still doing the things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but it doesn't feel like it anymore because they become such a lifestyle. And that's the difference between what I used to do when I first started, where it was like I put people on these like restrictive diets and food sensitivity tests and all of this, and they're like, how long do I have to do this? And now when I'm done with my clients after 4 months, 6 months, 8 months, I'm like, okay, anything that you have questions about, like, what do you keep doing? What do you not? And they're like, no, it's all pretty much a lifestyle. And like, if we've been doing a gut protocol or something, they're like, how long
Right.
do I keep taking these supplements? But for the most part, it's like, no, like I know what feels good. I know what works for me. I know
Mm-hmm.
what's daily, weekly, monthly, and you can pretty much stick with it. So that's the goal when you're listening to all of this. And like, man, I haven't even started with my hormones. It's like you just start with one thing at a time.
Yeah. And without even kind of expanding that, I'm curious because we hear it that your hormones can be impacted by your environment. And I'm not talking about mold. I'm not talking about, like my husband gets the anthrax shot and all kinds of other, poke things through the army, and he doesn't have a choice. But specifically in terms of like our skincare, beauty products, like the things that we are regularly exposed to, we're told that it's bad. So I'm asking you, is
Yeah.
it bad? Like, is it really is bad? Does it really have an impact? As much as people say that it is, that we should probably throw out our candles. I have an opinion on it, but
Yeah.
should we really toss them?
So I think that it's not the first thing that I look at. Now, I think it's actually a lot of people's like introduction into crunchy life. They're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I started getting, new hand soap, new makeup, new whatever. It's truly like I want to say it's part of step 6 out of my 6
Okay.
steps. I do
Yeah.
think it's important. And I don't see the same change if I thought if you throw out all your products in your house and start with non-toxic products, that's going to change your hormones faster than changing your food, then that's what I would start with. But that's not been my
Mm,
experience.
right.
So I have clean products in my home. I make a lot of them, and that's not me being fancy. Like my deodorant is coconut oil and baking soda. So I can
Right.
make that, right?
Yeah.
So like it's not because I make them like super cool. It's just like they're super simple. Um so like I do think that's important, and I will read the ingredients and buy the more expensive thing most of the time. And I've also really simplified the amount of products that I use because if it's going to cost me 3 times as much, I'm not buying, all the things.
Right.
So I do think it's important because there are so many chemicals, specifically if we're talking about just like what a woman puts on her body versus what a man. So I always look at like, what are you using the most? If you're putting hairspray in your hair every single day, if you're washing your face every single day, like what are you doing every single day or multiple times a day, then that's what you look at first. So I think deodorant is a great one to start with. I know that's what you started with. Um, Toothpaste, like what's going in your body, what's on your body. I don't really care nearly as much about the candles. Like you are breathing that in. Um, but that's like way down the road.
Sure.
If I have somebody who like still has a hormone problem
Right.
6 months, 8 months in, and I'm like, hold on, what candles do you have? Like,
Yeah.
what's in your car? Where's the air fresheners? Like, but at that point, we're really far down the road of troubleshooting.
Okay. I really love that, especially because just in, I think, the consumerism of social media, and we see this like huge market for non-toxic products, which is like awesome. because now we have options and we're like, oh yeah, maybe my Bath and Body Works stuff was giving me headaches because I lit it every day and then I sat down for 6 hours homework. So that might have had some sort of influence, you know. But I love that you said that your food truly has to be your foundation. And aside from that, it's all the basics of like, are you sleeping? Are you eating? Are you pooping? Because even if you toss all your makeup, if you're not doing those 3 things, it doesn't matter. So I love that.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that you can always, with like when you get to products, you can always just like do things as you run out of them. It doesn't have to be like you clean your whole house and change everything in one day. Again, like, if you get anything from this interview, it's like focus on one thing and get good at it before you do another thing. Because if you're just, you know, running around trying to change all the things at once, like you're never actually going to be successful. And then you're just going to be more discouraged and your hormones are not really going to feel good because of that.
Yeah, you're going to be more stressing and depressing, and that doesn't help anybody. So
nobody wants that.
Where can we connect with you? Like you said, you had some courses available. Where can we support you?
Yeah, so my favorite place to hang out is my podcast, Happily Hormonal. And then I also have an Instagram. It's at Leisha Drews. I'm there every once in a while, so feel free to reach out and I'll message you back eventually. But I do have a course and it's called Nourish Your Hormones. It's my 6-step foundations to really balancing your hormones over time. And that course comes with a really awesome community. Every time I go in that community, I'm like, man, how did these amazing women all find me and each other? Like, it's truly the best. So that is my primary way that I work with clients, and I've just consolidated. I just redone it this year. And so it has all of my 5 years of hormone balance, you know, all wrapped into my protocol. And so that is a really great place to focus and start, because I will walk you through step by step and I will not tell you to do everything at once so you can actually be successful. And then I do work with clients one-on-one as well and do the lab testing and all the deep dive. If that's you and you're like, I need the numbers, then that's the one for you.
Yeah, super thankful for that. And I'll definitely link all of those. So for our closing question, if you could provide any wisdom to your younger self or for our community that is listening, what would you share?
That's such a good one. I think that I would really go back to like taking a step back and learning to trust your gut a lot sooner. And also, you know, to not only trust your gut, but to not try to find all the answers on your own and really lean into like asking the Lord for answers. Because as I'm very much in the process of learning to do that, but as I am doing it, so much of the time, like I get an answer and I just would have assumed before that I wouldn't and that I needed to figure it out on my own. But even with health stuff, like we talked about in our episode, it's not all physical. So that would be it.
No, Leisha, I'm so thankful for you. So thankful for your wisdom and the way you serve women, because I know, I mean, shoot, I needed it. I still need it. But I'm super thankful for you and all that you shared on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Of course. And we will see you guys in the next episode. Thank you for listening, friend. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you don't want to miss any wisdom or encouragement, be sure to subscribe to the show. And don't forget to rate and review. Your feedback means so much and helps our community grow. If you're looking for more wellness wisdom and free resources, head over to livingwiselywell.com or get connected with me on Instagram at wiselywell. And if you're looking for a break from the hurried health lifestyle, check out my Return to Rest resource for tangible ways to slow down and finally find rest.